What happens aback Hollywood's best allegorical boxy guy meets daytime television's best abrupt host, and neither one is accommodating to a back down. You're about to attest in one of the best atomic confrontations in television history. Area account collides with heirs and area decades of acquaintance affray with avant-garde media politics. This isn't aloof edition's celebrity account gone wrong. This is the moment aback Clint Eastwood reminded anybody why you don't blend with a man who's been staring bottomward opponents for over 60 years. Accomplish abiding you. Subscribe and let me apperceive in the comments which ancillary you're on, because what you're about to apprehend will accept you acrimonious carelessness from the complete aboriginal exchange. The morning of the interview, producers at the appearance were active with excitement. Clint Eastwood, the man who had authentic adulthood for generations, was advancing to their show. At 94, he remained as articulate and uncompromising as any time with a new blur activity that had Hollywood talking. Joy Behar, accepted for her quick wit and a light quicker temper, had been advancing for days, armed with questions that she believed would advertise her interviewing prowess. The flat admirers was packed. Analysis, they were about to attest an article special. Clint absolved, assimilate the set with that accustomed abstinent stride. His attendance a non-advantageous the room. He wore a simple aphotic suit, his asperus easily abiding as he took his bench beyond from the panel. Joy leaned forward, her eyes already aflame with the affectionate of acuteness that approved admirers knew meant trouble. Clint Eastwood, welcome to The View, Joy began, her articulation accustomed, that bend of a head she aloof for guests she advised intellectually inferior. I accept to say, I'm abashed you agreed to appear on our show, because how altered our audiences apparently are. Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, a attenuate about face that anyone who knew his films would admit as a admonishing sign. Well, Joy, I've consistently believed in talking to all kinds of people. That's how you accept the world. That's interesting, Joy replied, her accent already acceptable, added confrontational. Because from what I've apparent of your movies and your politics, you accept to adopt a abundant, simpler worldview. You know, the accomplished, able, bashful type, shoot first, ask questions after mentality. The added hosts exchanged glances. This was starting faster than anyone had anticipated. Clint remained altogether still, his boring anchored on Joy with the affectionate of acuteness that had fabricated him famous. Aback he spoke, his articulation was low and measured. I anticipate you ability be ambageous movies with complete activity. Joy, in my experience, the bodies who allocution the best usually accept the atomic to say. A babble went through the audience. Joy's smile became added forced, her easily gesturing added badly as she apprenticed forward. Oh, so now we're activity to get the acumen of Hollywood. Acquaint me, Clint, what qualifies you to address anyone about accepting article to say? You've spent your career, arena cowboys and cops, and you've spent your career arena a character, too, Clint replied after missing a beat. The aberration as I apperceive aback, the cameras stopped rolling. The restriction in the flat was now palpable. The added hosts looked uncomfortable, but Joy seemed activated by the conflict. She leaned aback in her chair, her articulation ascent slightly. Excuse me, are you suggesting that I'm not authentic? That I'm putting on some affectionate of act? I've been speaking accurateness to ability for decades while you've been arena make Bill of Clint's announcement didn't change, but article in his aspect shifted. He sat up straighter, his easily bankrupt calmly in his lap. I'm suggesting that maybe you should accept added and address less. You arrive me actuality as a guest, not as an ambition for your political theater. Political theater. Joy's articulation was accepting bluff now. This is alleged journalism. Clint, maybe you're not acclimated to complete questions instead of softball interviews. Area anybody kisses your arena because you're some affectionate of legend. The admirers was absolutely bashful now. Analysis they were witnessing article unprecedented. Clint's eyes never larbored Joy's face. In aback he spoke. His articulation agitated the weight of decades of experience. I've been in this business. Continued abundant to apperceive the aberration amid journalism and achievement art. Complete journalists ask questions because they appetite answers. You ask questions because you appetite to apprehend your self-talk. Joy's face ablaze red. She affronted to the camera, afresh aback to Clint, her articulation now accustomed to calendar of agony, bearded his indignation. I can't accept this. You appear on our appearance and insult, not aloof me, but the complete profession of journalism. This is absolutely the affectionate of heirs I accepted from edition who's been amidst by Yesman for 50 years, 60 years. Clint adapted quietly. And in those 60 years, I've abstrused that account isn't article you demand, it's article you earn. You ability, appetite to anticipate about that. The flat fell into an afflictive silence. Joy looked about at her co-hosts, acutely assured support, but began alone abashed expressions. The producers in the ascendancy allowance were aimlessly aggravating to a judge whether to cut to bartering or let this comedy out. Joy, acumen, she was accident ascendancy of the situation, abstively to escalate. You apperceive, what, Clint? I anticipate your botheration is that you can't handle able women. You're from a bearing that accepted women to be apparent and not heard, and now that we accept voices, you can't accord with it. For the aboriginal time aback the account began, Clint smiled. It wasn't an affable smile. It was the affectionate smile that appeared in his movie's appropriate A4 edition. Fabricated a complete big mistake. He leaned advanced slightly, his articulation absolute, altogether calm. Joy, I've formed with some of the archwomen in Hollywood. Mealster, Frances McDormand, Hilary Swank. The aberration amid them and you is that they use their backbone to body something, not to breach bodies down. They don't abash actuality, loud with actuality, strong. Joy's aperture opened in bankrupt for a moment, acutely bent off bouncer by the allegory to admired actresses. But rather than abetment down, she angled bottomward with the affectionate of adventuresome carelessness that had fabricated her acclaimed. For all the amiss reasons, don't you cartel address me about able women, Joyce snapped. Her articulation now accustomed the acute bend that fabricated several admirers' associates visibly uncomfortable. You anticipate alleged bottomward a few actresses makes you some affectionate, of feminist ally. These are women who had two assignment in your system, comedy by your rules. Clint's articulation remained steady, but there was animate underneath. My system, I've directed and produced films that gave women advance roles aback the draft of Hollywood, was still alleviative, them like decoration. What except you done besides accuse about anybody else's work? What except I done? Joy's beam was absenthian and harsh. I've been affronted for women's rights and amusing amends while you've been assiduity baneful adulthood on screen. Your characters break problems with abandon and browbeating, absolutely, like you're accomplishing appropriate now. The allegation, abashed in the air like a challenge. Clint sat aback in his chair, his announcement unreadable. Aback, he spoke. His articulation was quieter than before, which somehow fabricated it added menacing. You anticipate this is intimidation. Joy, I haven't aloft my articulation once. I haven't threatened anyone. I've artlessly responded to your questions with honesty. If that feels like browbeating to you, maybe you should ask yourself why. Joy, affronted to the camera, acclamation the admirers directly. This is absolutely what I'm talking about. Folks, this is how able men shut bottomward women who cartel to claiming them. They use their reputation, their presence, their accomplished persona to accomplish. You feel small. Nobody's authentic, you feel baby but yourself. Clint replied, you're the one who started this chat with insults. You're the one who's been aggravating to put words in my aperture. Aback I sat down. I'm aloof, not arena forth with your game. The added hosts were attractive, added desperate. Whoopi Goldberg assuredly approved to intervene. Maybe we should allocution about Clint's new project. The acumen, he's absolutely actuality today. But Joy wasn't finished. She had that attending in her eyes that approved admirers knew meant she was about to say articles she'd regret. No, I anticipate this is added important. I anticipate our admirers deserve to see who Clint Eastwood absolutely is aback. He's not arena a character. This is the complete man, abaft the myth. Clint, affronted to attending at her directly. His boring, unwavering, you appetite to apperceive who I absolutely am. I'm addition who spent his activity acquirements, his craft, apropos, his colleagues, and aggravating to a quaint belief that matter. I'm addition who believes in alleviative bodies with address until they prove they don't deserve it. What about you, Joy? Who are you? Aback, you're not assuming abuse for the cameras. The catechism hit like a concrete blow. Joy's face went through an alternation of expressions from shock to acrimony to article abutting panic. She looked about the flat as if analytic for an escape route. But begin alone, the alert faces of the admirers and her added afflictive co-hosts. I'm addition who isn't abashed to ask the boxy questions, she said, but her articulation lacked its beforehand conviction. I'm addition who holds bodies accountable. Answerable for what? Clint asked. For accepting altered opinions than you. For not accordant with your political views. For not actuality afflicted by your performance. For assiduity, adverse stereotypes. Joy attempts back. Award her blaze again. For authentic movies that acclaim, abandon, and adult aggression. For actuality, allotment of arrangement that kept women and minorities in accessory roles for decades. Clint nodded slowly, as if because her words carefully. You apperceive what's absorbing about that accusation. It tells me you've never absolutely watched my films. If you had, you'd apperceive that some of my best assignment has been about the amount of violence, about burst men, aggravating to acquisition redemption. You'd apperceive that I've consistently casting able, changeable characters and actors of blush in cogent roles. I've apparent enough, Joy replied dismissively. I don't charge to watch every distinct one of your movies to accept what you represent. And there it is. Clint said, his articulation accustomed to calendar of satisfaction. You've aloof, accepted that you're criticizing assignment you haven't alike agitated to examine. You're advancing me based on assumptions and stereotypes, isn't it? That absolutely the affectionate of behavior you affirmation to action against. Joy's face ablaze, added Red. She was trapped by her own words, and she knew it. But instead of abetment bottomward gracefully, she chose to advance, added viciously. Don't try to about-face this about on me. I apperceive absolutely what you are. You're antique from a altered era, a time of back men like you could say, and do whatever you capital after consequences, while times accept afflicted, and your blazon of adulthood is no best acceptable in affable society. The words abashed in the air like a slap. The admirers gasped audibly. Alike, the added hosts looked abashed at the venom in Joy's voice. Clint sat altogether still for a continued moment, his announcement unreadable. Aback he assuredly spoke. His articulation was so quiet that anybody in the flat had to ache to apprehend him. My blazon of masculinity, you beggarly, the blazon that believes in alleviative bodies with account until they prove they don't deserve it. The blazon that thinks you should absolutely apperceive what you're talking about afore you accessible your mouth. The blazon that believes in earning your abode through assignment and aptitude rather than through loudness and controversy. Joy opened her aperture to respond, but Clint wasn't finished. He stood up slowly, his abounding acme in attendance. Pushing the studio, he wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting, but his ascendancy was absolute. You apperceive what's not acceptable in affable association Joy. Bodies who use their belvedere to advance in hatred, by these who advance others based on stereotypes and assumptions, by these who anticipate actuality, loud and abhorrent is the aforementioned affair, as actuality, right. The flat was asleep, silent. Joy looked about badly but began no abutment, from her co-hosts or the audience. She had pushed too far, and anybody knew it. Joy's agony was now arresting to anybody in the studio. She had corrected herself into a bend with her own assailant, and Clint's calm ascendancy was authentic, her attending a bait by the minute. But rather than retreat, she fabricated the baleful aberration of aggravating to achieve ascendancy through an alike added claimed attack. You don't get to angle there and address me about hatred, Joy said, her articulation arise slightly. You've fabricated a career out of adulatory abandon and revenge. Your movies are masturbation fantasies for affronted men who appetite to break their problems with guns. And now, you're aggravating to alarm me the aforementioned way your characters alarm anybody else. Clint remained standing, his Isley at his sides, his announcement unchanged. The blackout continued for what acquainted like an ENA, afore he spoke, his articulation accustomed the weight of decades of acquaintance and wisdom. Joy, I've been authentic movies. For over 60 years, I've formed with hundreds of actors, directors, writers, and aggregation members. I've never already had to accession my articulation or use browbeating to get what I wanted. You apperceive why. Because complete ascendancy doesn't appear from fear, it comes from respect. An account is acceptable through competence, integrity, and alleviative bodies decently. Joy's Isley were afraid now, admitting she approved to adumbrate it by arresting the accoutrements of her chair. You anticipate continuing up makes you added authoritative. You anticipate your acme, and your acceptability accord you the appropriate to allocution bottomward to me. I'm not talking bottomward to you, Clint replied evenly. I'm talking anon to you. Article you accept to be accepting agitation handling. You've spent this complete account aggravating to put me in a box, aggravating to accomplish me fit. Your assumption notions about who I am and what I represent, but I'm not activity to comedy that game. The added hosts were frozen, borderline whether to arbitrate or let this comedy out. The producers in the ascendancy allowance were aimlessly aggravating to adjudge whether this was abundant television or a complete disaster. The admirers watched, in abashed blackout, as Joy fabricated her abutting atrocious move. This is absolutely what I expected, Joy said, her articulation now accustomed to calendar of hysteria. A man who can't handle actuality challenged by a woman. You're so acclimated to anybody alleviative, you like some affectionate of God, that you can't accord with addition, who sees through your act. Clint's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, anybody in the flat saw a beam of the barbarous assurance that had fabricated him famous. But aback he spoke, his articulation remained altogether controlled. You accumulate adage, I can't handle, actuality, challenged. But you haven't challenged me. Joy, you've attacked me. There's a difference. Acclaiming involves presenting facts, allurement, anxious questions, agreeable, incomplete dialogue. What you've done is bandy accusations and insults. Acquisitive article will stick. Joy, affronted to the camera again, her articulation acceptable, added shrill. Do you see this? Folks, this is how the patriarchy works. They accomplish you feel like you're the botheration for continuing up to them. They accomplish you feel like your actuality absurd for ambitious accountability. The alone actuality, authentic you, attending absurd, is you, Clint said quietly. You arrive me actuality as a guest. A fresh spent the complete time aggravating to breach me down. You've accepted, you haven't agitated to absolutely watch my assignment. Afore criticizing it, you've fabricated assumptions about who I am based on stereotypes and political talking points. That's not journalism. That's not alike entertainment. That's aloof, sad. The chat's sad hit Joy like a concrete blow. She recoiled as if she'd been slapped, her face cycling through affections to bound to track. Aback, she battened again. Her articulation was almost controlled. Don't you cartel alarm me, sad? I've been affronted for amusing amends and women's rights for decades. I've acclimated my Belvedere to allege accurateness to power, to authority bodies like you, answerable for the accident you've done to society. Clint sat aback bottomward slowly, his movement advised and measured. You accumulate talking about speaking, accurateness to power. But what accurateness except you announced today? You've fabricated accusations after evidence, attacked positions I've never taken, an angered assignment you've never agitated to examine. That's not truth. That's prejudice. Joy's breath was acceptable, added rapid, her accord absolutely shattered. I don't charge to watch every distinct one of your movies to accept what you represent. You're a attribute of aggregate, that's amiss with adult ability in America. A symbol, Clint afresh, thoughtfully. Not a actuality, with thoughts and animosity, and complexities, but a symbol. Article you can activity your acrimony, assimilate after accepting, to accord with the absoluteness of who I absolutely am. That's the botheration with your complete approach, Joy. You don't see people, you see symbols and stereotypes. The accurateness of his ascertainment was devastating. Joy looked about the flat wildly, analytic for support, but begin alone, of faces and averted eyes. Alike her best loyal co-hosts were starting to ambit themselves from her behavior. You're aggravating to accomplish this about me, Joy said, her articulation now desperate. But this is about you and your albatross as a accessible figure. You've afflicted ancestors of men to accept that abandon and aloofness are the solutions to life's problems. Clint leaned advanced slightly, his articulation demography on a benevolent accent that somehow fabricated his words alike, added cutting. Joy, I've fabricated films about the amount of violence, about burst men acquirements to affix with others, about the accent of association and redemption. If you had absolutely watched them, instead of aloof, reacting to what you anticipate they represent, you ability, accept that. I've apparent enough, Joy snapped, but her articulation lacked confidence now. No, you haven't, Clint replied firmly. You've apparent what you capital to see. You've filtered aggregate through your own biases and preconceptions. You've absent who I am based on your political agenda, not on any complete ability of my assignment or my character. Joy stood up abruptly, her armchair abrading adjoined the floor. I don't accept to sit actuality and accept to this. This is my show, and I don't accept to abide, actuality lectured by addition who represents aggregate I've spent my career affronted against. Your show, Clint asked quietly. I anticipation this was alleged the View, not the Joy Show, but maybe that's the botheration appropriate there. The animadversion was altogether timed and devastatingly accurate. Joy's face went white, a fresh red, a fresh white again. She looked about the flat as if seeing it for the aboriginal time, acumen that her behavior had alienated not aloof, her guest, but her co-hosts and admirers as well. You apperceive what? Joy said, her articulation now afraid with rage. I've had abundant of this. You came on this appearance with an agenda, to accomplish me attending bad, to abash me in advance of our audience. Well, congratulations, you've succeeded. Clint remained seated, his announcement calm but firm. Joy, I came on this appearance to allocution about my assignment and maybe accept a affable conversation. You're the one who affronted this into a confrontation. You're the one who fabricated assumptions and threw accusations. I've artlessly responded to your behavior with honesty. Your bluntness is aloof, addition, anatomy of aggression, Joy attempt back, but the words articulate alveolata like to her. And your assailant is aloof addition, anatomy of insecurity, Clint replied after missing a beat. You're so threatened by anyone who doesn't and non-exceed with your worldview that you advance them rather than aggravating to accept them. Joy affronted to the producers off camera, her articulation now pleading. Are we absolutely activity to let this continue? Are we absolutely activity to let him about-face our appearance into his claimed platform? But the producers were as arctic as anybody else. They were witnessing television history, and they knew it. This wasn't aloof, an account gone wrong. This was a masterclass in how address and accord could celebration over assailment and hysteria. Clint stood up again, this time effective against the bend of the set. I anticipate I've said aggregate. I charge to say, Joy, I achievement anytime you'll absolutely watch my films with an accessible mind. You ability be abashed by what you find. Don't you cartel, airing abroad from me, Joy shouted, her articulation now absolutely unhinged. We're not accomplished here. I'm not done with you. Clint paused and affronted aback to face her, His announcement, sad but resolute. Yes, you are. You were done the moment you absolutely to advance instead of engage, to accept instead of ask, to accomplish instead of listen. This isn't an account anymore. It's a tantrum, and I don't participate in tantrums. With that, he began removing his microphone, his movements calm and deliberate. Joy watched in abhorrence as she accomplished what was happening. Her guest, one of the best admired abstracts in Hollywood, was walking abroad from her appearance because of her behavior. You can't aloof, leave, Joy said, her articulation now baby and desperate. This is the view. Bodies don't aloof, airing abroad from the view. Clint handed his microphone to a abashed assembly of better and looked back at Joy one final time. Body, with address due. The blackout that followed was deafening. Joy stood arctic in the average of the set, her face a affectation of abasement and rage. The added hosts sat in abashed silence, borderline how-to action, what they had aloof witnessed. The admirers watched in allure as Clint absolved calmly against the exit. His address complete admitting aggregate that had been befuddled at him. As he accomplished the bend of the set, Clint paused and affronted a back to the camera. Acclamation the admirers anon for the aboriginal time. To anyone watching this, I achievement you'll be think that complete backbone isn't about actuality the loudest articulation in the room. It's about alive, who you are, and continuing by your attempt alike. A back addition tries to breach you down. Thank you for your time. And with that, he absolved off the set. Abrogation abaft a flat and anarchy and a host whose acceptability would never balance from the battle she had accomplished and absent so completely. Joy remained continuing in the average of the set, her aperture, and closing. Like a angle out of baptize as the abounding a pulse of what had aloof happened began to bore in. She had arrived a fable assimilate her show, and had managed to accomplish herself attending small, petty, and amateurish in comparison. The man she had approved to abate had instead appear her own appearance flaws for all the apple to see. That's the ability of accurate address beneath fire. Folks, sometimes, the best adverse acknowledgement to assailment isn't to action back, but to artlessly debride to participate in the game. Clint Eastwood reminded us all that complete backbone doesn't charge to prove itself through loud choir or claimed attacks. It speaks for itself through actions, character, and the simple abnegation to be abject bottomward to addition else's level. What did you anticipate of this confrontation? Did Joy get what she deserved, or did Clint go too far? Let me apperceive in the comments below.